Captain Jack Miller sat in his small office, going over the daily reports. The usual boring data. The same routine. But today was different. He heard the hum of activity outside his window. Soldiers rushed back and forth, hurried and anxious. He stepped outside, trying to catch the reason for all the fuss. A massive spaceship, unlike anything Earth had seen before, hovered just above the ground. Its smooth surface shimmered in the sunlight, reflecting the blue sky. Jack's stomach tightened. The air was thick with tension. Earth's leaders had long feared the day when an alien race would visit. Today seemed to be that day. He grabbed his gear and headed toward the command center. As soon as he arrived, he was briefed. The ship was enormous, and no one knew where it came from. The message from the ship was simple. It was not an attack, still. No one could fully trust the aliens' word. Jack's orders were clear. Find out what the aliens wanted and keep the planet safe. As Jack made his way to the ship, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just another military mission. His heart raced. He had been a soldier for years, but this felt different. This wasn't just another battle. This was a chance to shape the future of humanity. When Jack reached the ship, he was greeted by two armed guards. Their eyes were filled with fear, but they didn't speak. They simply pointed toward the entrance. Jack walked slowly, his boots crunching against the rocky ground. The ship was silent, no sound of engines or hums. The door opened before he reached it. Inside, it was completely dark, but not for long. A soft light flickered on, revealing a stunning woman. Her eyes were the color of the ocean, deep and endless, and her skin shimmered. As though covered in stardust, she stood tall, her posture straight and commanding. Her features were sharp, yet somehow soft, an alien beauty unlike anything Jack had ever seen before. "I'm Lyra," she spoke, her voice soft yet firm. Echoing in the silence of the room, Jack felt his breath catch in his throat. He had expected to see an alien, something strange, something monstrous. But this woman, standing before him, looked human. She smiled, her lips curling slightly, as if she could read his thoughts. "I know what you're thinking," she continued. "You believe I have come to invade your planet." Jack stared at her, unsure of what to say. His heart was racing. His mind was confused. He'd been trained to defend Earth from the unknown, to be ready for an attack, but she was not what he expected. He had thought he'd face a war machine or an army, not a single woman standing in front of him. Lyra stepped closer, her eyes locking onto his. "I am not here to fight," she said. "I have come to ask for help." Jack's mind raced. Help? Earth had never been good at asking for help, especially from outsiders. The last time a race had come to Earth with peaceful intentions, things had gone terribly wrong. He wanted to trust her, but fear and caution held him back. "Why should we help you?" Jack asked, his voice firm but uncertain. He was trying to understand, trying to make sense of what was happening. She seemed to sense his hesitation and took a step back. "My people are dying. We need your species to survive," Lyra said quietly. She didn't seem angry or aggressive. In fact, she seemed sad. "We've tried everything, but nothing works. Our species is becoming extinct. I have been sent here to make an offer." Jack frowned, not sure if he was hearing her correctly. "What do you mean? What kind of offer?" The silence between them stretched on for a moment. Jack couldn't believe what he was hearing. His mind fought to process it all. Mating. Was this some kind of joke? His first instinct was to deny everything she said, to turn away and call for backup. But there was something in her eyes, something in the way she spoke, that made him hesitate. She wasn't lying. He could tell that much. "I don't know if I can believe this," Jack finally said, his voice low. "How do we even know you're telling the truth?" Lyra's eyes softened, and she stepped closer, her presence almost overwhelming. "You don't have to believe me right now, but you will," she said gently, "in time. You will see that I am telling you the truth. You are our only hope, Jack. Your species is strong, and together, we might just be able to save both of our worlds." Jack's mind was spinning. He had come here expecting to deal with an invasion, a threat. But this was something entirely different. He didn't know what to believe. All he knew was that the future of Earth, and possibly his own fate, was tied to the strange woman in front of him. And so, with a heavy heart and a mind full of questions, Jack stood there, staring at Lyra, wondering what came next. Jack sat in his small room, staring out of the window. His mind was still trying to process everything Lyra had told him. She wasn't here to invade. She wasn't here to fight. She was here because her people needed help, and that help was human DNA. The idea seemed impossible, unreal. How could this beautiful, calm woman really be here for that? He had spent his entire life training for combat, protecting Earth from threats, not offering assistance to aliens. He shook his head, trying to clear his thoughts. But the more he thought about it, the more confused he became. Earth had faced danger before, alien ships, weapons, and war. But this was something completely new. There was no book on how to handle this situation. His training didn't cover something like this. The door to his room opened softly, and in walked General Harris, his superior officer. "Jack," Harris said, his voice low and serious. "We need to talk." Jack stood and faced the general. He didn't have time for formalities right now. "I don't know what to make of this, sir," he said, his frustration clear. "She says she's here to mate, to save her species. How am I supposed to believe that?" Harris sighed, rubbing his forehead. "I know it sounds strange, but we've been given orders to follow. The higher-ups believe this is some kind of trick. They're not taking any chances." Jack nodded, his hands clenching at his sides. The military was always prepared for war, but now they didn't know what to do with this situation. They didn't know if they could trust Lyra or if this was a trap. He understood their caution, but in his gut, he felt something different. Lyra didn't seem like an enemy. She wasn't acting like one, and her words echoed in his mind. "You are our only hope." "I don't know, sir," Jack said, shaking his head. "I just can't ignore how sincere she is. She doesn't seem like a threat, but everything else, it doesn't make sense. We're going to figure this out, Jack. We'll have a meeting with the other leaders soon. I need you to stay close to her, watch her, but keep your distance. We're not sure what her people want, and we can't take any risks." Jack didn't respond immediately. He just stared at the ground, trying to make sense of his emotions. He felt sympathy for Lyra, but that sympathy was tangled up with the fear and uncertainty that came with being in a situation he wasn't trained to handle. There was no manual for peace talks with aliens. There was only instinct and training. And right now, his instincts were confused. Over the next few days, Jack's interactions with Lyra were limited. He was told to keep an eye on her, not to trust her fully. But every time he saw her, the doubts in his mind grew. She was calm, kind even, never once showing aggression. Every conversation they had made her story seem more plausible. She wasn't the alien invader he had feared. She was just lost, desperate, and he couldn't help but feel the weight of her words. "You are our only hope." Despite his growing sympathy for her, Jack knew that his duty was to Earth, to protect humanity. The military would never accept a peace agreement with an alien race without proof. They needed evidence that Lyra's intentions were pure. But how could he prove something like that? How could he prove the sincerity of her heart when it seemed like everything around them was pointing toward war? One afternoon, Jack sat with Lyra in a quiet room on the ship. She had insisted on speaking to him alone, away from the watchful eyes of the military. She said she wanted to explain more, to make him understand. He agreed, though it felt strange. This wasn't what he was used to. He wasn't used to sitting down and having a calm conversation with someone from another world. "I know you don't trust me, Jack," Lyra said, her voice soft as she leaned forward. "But I want you to understand, my people, we are not what you think we are. We were once a peaceful race, living in harmony. But the wars, the destruction, they've changed us. We no longer have the strength to survive on our own." Jack met her eyes, seeing the sadness behind them. It wasn't just the alien's beauty that made him feel for her. It was the depth of her pain. She wasn't the enemy. She was someone who had lost everything and was fighting to survive. But why here? Why us? Jack asked. Why didn't you try with another species? Lyra sighed, looking down at her hands. Your species. You are strong. You adapt. You grow. We have studied you, watched you from afar, and we saw hope in you. We saw that you could help us rebuild what we lost. That's why I was sent here, to offer a solution. I never wanted to hurt anyone. Jack's heart ached as he listened. Her words, her sincerity, pulled at something deep inside him. But still, the weight of his orders pressed on him. If he believed her, it could mean a future where humans and aliens work together. If he didn't, it could lead to war. I don't know if I can convince them, Jack said, his voice low. The military, they won't trust you. And if they find out about this offer, they'll think it's a trick. Lyra's eyes softened, and she reached out, placing her hand on his. I understand your fears, Jack, but I can only ask that you see the truth in my heart. Jack was silent for a moment, still uncertain. He wanted to trust her, wanted to believe in the possibility of peace. But the world wasn't ready for that kind of change, and Jack wasn't sure he was either. Jack stood outside the meeting room, his hands clenched at his sides. The sounds of hushed conversations and clicking of keys filled the air. Inside the room, Earth's top leaders were meeting to discuss the alien situation. Jack had been called in to present his findings about Lyra and her people. It felt like he was caught between two worlds, one that demanded loyalty to Earth, and the other that spoke of peace, something he wasn't sure Earth was ready to. Except when the doors opened, Jack stepped in, his mind racing. The room went silent. High-ranking officials from the military, the government, and scientists all turned their gaze on him, sitting at the front. General Harris gave him a nod to speak. Jack cleared his throat. We've made contact with the alien ship. The woman on board, Lyra, is not here to invade, as we feared. She claims that her people are dying, and they need human DNA to survive. She's not here for war. She says their race is on the verge of extinction. A murmur ran through the room. Jack could see the doubt in their eyes. There were too many questions, too many uncertainties. She hasn't shown any signs of aggression. Jack continued. She's calm, even desperate. But I can't say for sure if her story is completely true. I've spent time with her, and she believes her people's survival is tied to us. Are we supposed to trust her just because she says so? One of the scientists asked, his voice skeptical. This could be a trap. There's no evidence. They could be manipulating you. Jack paused, trying to find the right words. He felt the pressure from both sides. I understand your concerns, he said, looking round the room. But she hasn't done anything to hurt us. I've seen it in her eyes. She's not lying. At least not about her people's desperation. I know we need more proof, but we can't just dismiss her either. A general from the military stood up, his face hard. What if she's lying to you, Captain? What if she's using you to gain our trust, only to turn on us later? We can't afford to take risks like that. Jack's fists tightened. I've been a soldier my whole life. My duty has always been to protect Earth. But sometimes we have to think beyond just fighting. This is bigger than us. If her story is true, we have the chance to save both our species. But if we react with fear and attack, it could lead to war. The room fell silent. The weight of Jack's words hung in the air. He knew it was risky, but in his gut, he felt something had to be done. The alternative was too terrifying to imagine. I don't expect everyone to agree with me, Jack said, his voice steady. But I believe we should give her a chance to prove herself. If we refuse without trying, we may lose something much more valuable. Another voice spoke up, this time from the government. Captain Miller's right. We need to investigate further. We can't jump to conclusions based on fear alone. We need to understand more about these aliens and what they truly want. There was a long pause. Jack watched as the room fell into deep thought. Finally, General Harris spoke again. We'll give Lyra a chance, but we'll keep her under close watch. If she shows any signs of being a threat, we will act. Jack nodded, though his mind was still filled with doubt. The decision was made, but he couldn't shake the feeling that things were far from simple. The military would be watching closely, and Lyra would be on edge. It was a test, not just for her, but for him too. A few hours later, Jack returned to the alien ship. Lyra was waiting in the same room where they had first met. Her eyes brightened when she saw him, but Jack couldn't read her expression. Was she relieved that Earth had agreed to hear her out, or was she preparing for the worst? I spoke with them, Jack said, taking a seat opposite her. The decision has been made. They're willing to give you a chance, but there are still a lot of doubts. They want to be sure you're telling the truth. They'll keep a close eye on you. Lyra's face remained calm, but Jack saw the small sigh of relief she let out. Thank you, Jack, she said quietly. I didn't expect this to be easy, but it's a start. Jack looked at her closely. Why did you choose me? I'm just a soldier. Why me? She smiled softly, a faint sadness in her eyes. I didn't choose you, Jack. My mission was to find someone who could understand, someone who could see beyond the surface. And when I met you, I saw that you had the heart to see the truth, even when it was hard to accept. Her words struck a chord deep within him. He had never thought of himself as someone who could change the fate of two species. He had always followed orders, obeyed commands. But now, yes, she replied, her voice gentle but firm. We need more than just your biology. We need your culture, your wisdom, your heart. We need to learn to live together. Jack looked at her, understanding more than ever the weight of the decision ahead. She wasn't just asking for survival. She was asking for a future that could change everything. He didn't know what the future would bring. But one thing was clear. Lyra wasn't just some alien visitor. She was a messenger, a bridge between two worlds, and whether humanity liked it or not, their future was tied to hers. The days that followed the meeting were tense. Jack found himself torn between his duty and the connection he had started to feel with Lyra. The military watched closely, tracking her every move. Even though Earth's leaders had agreed to give her a chance, the pressure was mounting. More questions, more doubts were emerging. What if this was all a trick? What if Lyra's people were only waiting for the right moment to strike? Jack couldn't shake the feeling that things were moving too quickly. He had seen the compassion in Lyra's eyes, but that didn't mean her people's intentions were the same. It was hard to ignore the whispers from the higher-ups, the constant reminder that if Lyra or her people made one wrong move, Earth would respond with force. The tension was inescapable, and Jack was beginning to feel the weight of it every minute. He stood in the military base's control room, staring at the large screens that displayed images of the alien ship. Lyra had been moved to a secure location. Nearby, though still under heavy surveillance, he could see her on the screens, calm, still. But it seemed like a facade. There was something more to her. Jack knew she wasn't telling him everything. But then again, how could she? She was from a species so different from humanity. What if she was keeping secrets out of fear? General Harris walked in, his face set in a hard line. Jack, we need to talk. There's a lot of pressure from the top. They want results, and they want them now. Jack turned to face him, his jaw tight. I know, sir, but I can't just force her to prove herself. She's been nothing but honest with me so far. And how long do we wait? Harris asked, his voice low but filled with frustration. We don't have the luxury of time. Earth is in danger, Jack. If we don't act, there could be consequences we're not prepared for. Jack clenched his fists. He understood the general's concern, but it didn't make things any easier. He couldn't deny the fear that was spreading through the ranks. The thought of trusting an alien species, even one that seemed peaceful, was difficult to accept for many, but Jack couldn't help but feel that humanity was on the brink of something that could change everything. We don't know enough yet, Jack said, his voice steady. We can't jump to conclusions. Harris sighed. I wish it were that simple. But what about this? I've received reports that we've been receiving transmissions from other alien ships. They're asking questions. Some of them are hostile. It seems like Lyra's people aren't the only ones interested in Earth. The words hit Jack like a punch to the stomach. Other ships? Hostile ones? Do we know who they are? Jack asked, his heart racing. We're still gathering intel, Harris replied, his voice grim. But we can't ignore the possibility that Lyra's people might have more enemies than we thought. We need to be ready for anything. Jack felt a cold shiver run down his spine. If other alien races were out there, watching Earth, it could mean trouble. But what if these other aliens were looking for the same thing Lyra was? What if they didn't have peaceful intentions? What if they were the ones who would invade? While Lyra's people were simply trying to survive. There's more, Harris said, pulling up a map on the screen. These ships are moving toward Earth. They're getting closer. We need to decide what we're going to do. Jack stared at the map, his mind racing. The situation was growing more complicated by the hour. The military's orders were clear. They had to be prepared for any threat, but Jack couldn't ignore the hope he saw in Lyra's eyes. The trust she had placed in him. If these new aliens were hostile, would they really be any different from the humans who had always fought to protect their own? It wasn't just about defense anymore. It was about understanding, about choosing who to trust in a galaxy full of uncertainty. I'll speak to Lyra, Jack said, his voice firm. I'll see if she knows anything about these other ships. Harris looked at him with a mixture of doubt and understanding. You do that, Captain. But don't let your guard down. The moment we let our defenses slip is the moment we lose everything. Jack nodded, knowing full well that the next few days could determine the future of Earth. If Lyra's people were truly as peaceful as she said, they could be an ally in the fight against the unknown ships. But if they weren't, if they had hidden agendas, the consequences could be devastating. Later that day, Jack stood before Lyra, the weight of the situation heavy on his shoulders. She was waiting for him, her face as calm as ever, though Jack could see the hint of worry in her eyes. What's going on, Jack? Lyra asked softly, her voice almost a whisper. I can feel the tension. Something's changing. Jack hesitated before speaking. There are other alien ships on the way. We don't know if they're hostile, but we have to prepare. I need to know if you've had contact with them, or if you know who they are. Lyra's eyes widened with surprise. Other ships? No. Jack, I haven't heard of any. I was only sent to you, to your world. There's no one else like me. Jack studied her face, looking for any sign of deception. You're sure about that? She nodded slowly. I swear it, Jack. My mission is to save my people, not to lead anyone into war. Jack felt the weight of her words settle on his heart. If she was telling the truth, it meant there were unknown forces out there. Forces that might not care about peace. He had to make a choice, one that could change the course of history. For both Earth and Lyra's species. Tins, Jack was growing, more restless with every passing moment. There were no clear answers, only questions that led to more uncertainty. The military had begun to ramp you ignore the attraction, the pull that was growing stronger by the day. He knew it was dangerous, it was forbidden, but there was something about her presence, something that made him forget the rules, forget the mission. He was only human. One evening, after the day's meetings had ended, Jack found himself standing outside Lyra's quarters. His heart was pounding in his chest. He wasn't sure why he had come. He wasn't supposed to be there. The military had made it clear that he was not to get too close. But there was something inside him that urged him to go. He needed answers. He needed to know the truth. And he needed to understand what was happening between them. He knocked softly, his hand trembling slightly. The door opened with a quiet hiss, revealing Lyra standing in the doorway. Her eyes were soft, yet there was a hint of sadness behind them. She had been waiting for him. Jack realized he wasn't sure what to say, but the words came out anyway. Lyra, can we talk? She stepped aside, allowing him to enter. The room was simple, with a bed in the corner and a small table. Lyra sat down on the bed, her gaze never leaving Jack. He hesitated for a moment before sitting across from her. The silence between them felt heavy, but Jack knew he had to break it. Why didn't you tell me the truth sooner? Jack asked, his voice softer than he intended. About your people, about why you're really here. Lyra looked down, her expression troubled. I didn't want to burden you, Jack. I didn't want to make you feel like you had to help us. I came here because my people need human DNA. But that's not all. I didn't expect to feel this connection with you. Jack's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean, connection? Lyra's eyes met his, and there was something in her gaze that made his chest tighten. When I came to Earth, I didn't expect to feel anything. I thought I was just carrying out a mission. But when I met you, Jack, I felt something I've never felt before. A bond. It's hard to explain. But I feel like I know you. Even though we come from different worlds, Jack swallowed hard. He had felt it too. The way her presence seemed to fill the room, the way her words reached deep into his soul. But he couldn't let himself get lost in it. He was here to protect Earth, not to get caught up in something that could ruin everything. I can't do this, Lyra, he said, his voice strained. I'm a soldier. I can't let myself get close to you. It's too dangerous. There's too much at stake. Lyra nodded slowly, as if she had expected him to say that. I understand, Jack. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but I had to tell you the truth. I can't keep pretending that I don't care about you. Jack closed his eyes, his heart heavy with conflicting emotions. He wanted to deny it, to push her away. But deep down, he knew that what he was feeling was real. It wasn't just about survival or duty. It was about something much deeper, something that neither of them had control over. I don't know what to do, Jack whispered. I don't know what to believe anymore. I want to help you, I do. But I can't risk everything for something I don't fully understand. Lyra reached out and took his hand gently. You don't have to understand everything right now, Jack. All I'm asking is for you to trust me and trust yourself. We may come from different worlds, but I believe we can find a way to make this work together. Jack felt her warmth seep into him, and for a moment, all of the fear, all of the uncertainty seemed to fade away. It was just him and Lyra. He could feel her heart beating, her breath steady and calm. It was as if time had stopped, and for the first time in days, Jack felt at peace. But as much as he wanted to let himself feel that peace, he knew it wasn't that simple. There were too many forces at play, too many people watching. Earth wasn't ready for a future with aliens, no matter how much he wanted it to be. I can't promise anything, Lyra, Jack said, pulling his hand away reluctantly. I have a duty to my people, but I'll do everything I can to make sure we don't lose the chance for peace. Lyra smiled softly, a small but hopeful expression. That's all I'm asking for, Jack. Just give us a chance. That's all we need. Jack stood up, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on him again. He knew what he had to do. The road ahead would be difficult, but it was one he couldn't walk alone. Lyra wasn't just a stranger from another world. She was someone he had come to care about, and whether they were ready for it or not, their fates were intertwined. As he walked out of the room, Jack couldn't help but wonder if this was the beginning of something that would change the course of history. For better or for worse, he couldn't say. But one thing was certain, everything was about to change. The days were growing shorter, the pressure heavier. The world was watching, waiting for a decision. Jack could feel the tension in the air, in every conversation, every glance. The military was prepared for anything, and the higher-ups were still undecided. The thought of trusting Lyra, of trusting an alien species, was too much for many to accept, yet there was still that small part of Jack's heart that hoped for peace, hoped for a future where humanity could coexist with beings from other worlds. But that hope was fading fast. The new alien ships were getting closer. Jack had seen the reports. They were unlike any ship the world had ever known. The unknown aliens were powerful, and their intentions were unclear. The military was readying for battle, but Jack had one final chance to speak to Lyra, one final chance to understand the truth. He arrived at her quarters, his mind racing. The weight of the situation was overwhelming. The last few days had been filled with briefings and urgent discussions. There was no time left. The military was ready to act, and Jack knew that if he didn't find the answers he needed now, the future of both Earth and Lyra's species would be decided by someone else. Lyra was waiting for him. She stood by the window, her gaze distant, as if she was already lost in her thoughts. Jack hesitated for a moment before stepping inside. Lyra, he said, his voice soft but steady. "I need to know the truth, everything. I can't go on without knowing what's really happening." Lyra turned to face him, her eyes meeting his. There was a sadness in her expression, but also something else, something deep in knowing. She didn't speak immediately. Instead, she walked toward him, her movements slow and deliberate, as though choosing her words carefully. "I've been hiding things from you, Jack," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Things that I thought I could protect you from. But I see now that you need to know. You deserve to know everything." Jack's heart raced. He could feel the weight of her words hanging in the air, heavy with meaning. "What do you mean? What are you hiding?" Lyra took a deep breath and sat down on the small chair beside the bed. "When I came to Earth, I told you that my species was dying, that we needed human DNA to survive. That was true. But there's more to it. The reason my people are dying isn't just because of our biology. It's because of our history. Our people, we were once peaceful, but over time, we were changed. We became something darker, something that killed the hope we had. We became tools of destruction." Jack's mind spun as he listened. "What are you saying?" Lyra looked down, her hands trembling slightly. "We were manipulated, Jack, our leaders. The ones who sent me here, they aren't the peaceful beings I've shown you. They have their own agenda. They want to use your species. They don't care about peace. They only want power. And they've been hiding this from me. They've been lying to me, just as they've lied to you." Jack felt his stomach drop. The fear, the doubt that he had been trying to ignore now flooded to the surface. He had trusted Lyra. He had believed in her. But now, everything was in question. Was she just another pawn in a much bigger game? "You're telling me that your people aren't what you said they were?" Jack asked, his voice shaking. Lyra nodded slowly. "Yes, my people are not innocent. And now, because of my mission, I'm caught between two worlds. I can't turn back to my leaders. They won't listen to me. But I can't stay here, either, not with the risk of my people using Earth for their own gain." Jack felt as though the ground was slipping beneath him. "But why did you come to me? Why did you trust me?" Lyra's eyes softened, and she took a step closer. "Because, Jack, you were the only one who saw me for who I really am. You didn't see a weapon. You saw a person. You saw someone who wanted peace, someone who needed help. I didn't expect to find that. I didn't expect to find someone who believed in what I was trying to do. But you did." Jack stood in silence, processing what she had just said. It felt as though everything he thought he knew had been turned upside down. Lyra wasn't the enemy. Her people weren't the peaceful race they had claimed to be. And yet, in this moment, he realized something that struck him deep inside. Lyra was still fighting for peace, even if her people weren't. She had come to Earth with the hope of saving them, even if it meant going against everything she had been taught. "I don't know what to do now," Jack said quietly, his voice full of doubt. "I don't know who to trust. Everything is falling apart." Lyra stood in front of him, her hand resting on his arm. "You don't have to do this alone, Jack. We can figure this out together. But we need to make a choice. We need to stop my leaders before they destroy everything we've worked for. If we don't, the consequences will be catastrophic." Jack closed his eyes for a moment, his mind racing. He had never been in a situation like this before. There were no easy answers, no simple solutions. But as he stood there with Lyra, he knew one thing for sure. This was no longer about military strategy. This was about something deeper, something human. It was about trust. "Okay," Jack said, opening his eyes and looking at her. "We'll stop them. Together." Lyra's face softened into a small smile. "Thank you, Jack. You don't know how much this means to me." Jack nodded, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. He didn't know what would happen next. But for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was on the right path. The road ahead was uncertain, but they had made their decision. Now, all they had to do was fight for the future they both wanted. The world had been on edge for weeks. News reports were filled with talk of strange alien ships approaching Earth, and every military base was on high alert. The tension between the two sides was growing by the hour, and Jack could feel it in the air. He had never imagined he would be caught in the middle of something like this. He had always followed orders, always been a soldier first, but now he was fighting for something bigger, for peace, for understanding, and for the future of two worlds. Jack walked through the corridors of the military base, his mind filled with thoughts of Lyra. She had become more than just a mission, more than just a subject to be studied. She had become a symbol of what humanity could be, of what Earth could achieve if it embraced the unknown. She wasn't just an alien. She was someone who had come to Earth with the hope of saving both her species and humanity. And Jack had promised her that he would help. He arrived at the control room, where General Harris and other top officials were gathered around the table. The room was filled with tension, the weight of the decision hanging heavy in the air. Jack could see the uncertainty in everyone's eyes. They had already made their decision to try and stop the alien leaders, but no one knew how to do it without starting a war. The unknown alien ships were getting closer, and the military was ready to act. But Jack knew they couldn't just fight. They had to find a way to talk, to reason with them. Harris turned to Jack as he entered the room. "Captain, we've got less than 48 hours before the other ships reach Earth. We can't afford to wait any longer. We need a plan." Jack nodded, taking a deep breath. "I know, sir, but we can't go in guns blazing. We have to find a way to communicate, to understand what these ships want before we attack. We don't have time for diplomacy," one of the generals said sharply. "We're risking our entire planet here." Jack turned to face him. "I understand. But if we don't give them a chance, we might be making the biggest mistake of our lives." The room fell silent as everyone processed his words. Jack could feel the pressure building. He wasn't sure if his plan would work, but he knew they had to try. "We've already made contact with the other ships," Harris said, breaking the silence. "We've given them the option to talk, but if they don't respond, we'll have no choice but to take action." Jack's heart raced. This was it. This was the moment where everything would be decided, where humanity's fate would be determined by the actions they took in the next few hours. He had no doubt that the military was ready for a fight, but was Earth ready to make peace? He wasn't sure, but he had to believe that it was possible. Meanwhile, Lyra stood in her quarters, her mind also racing. She had been told that the military would make its move soon, but she didn't know what to expect. She knew that Jack was doing everything he could to make sure that war didn't break out. But even she, with all her knowledge, didn't know what the future held. Her people were desperate, and she had already seen the kind of destruction that could come from a fight. But what if Jack couldn't convince them? What if they made the wrong decision? She took a deep breath and walked to the window. From here, she could see the stars, the distant lights of other worlds. She thought of her home, of her people who had sent her here with the hope that Earth would be the key to their survival. It had always been a dream, but now it felt like a dream that might slip away, like everything she had worked for was about to crumble. The door to her room opened, and Jack entered, his face tense. He looked at her with an intensity she hadn't seen before. "It's time," he said simply. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. "What's going to happen?" Jack hesitated before speaking. "We're going to try to stop them, Lyra. We're going to give peace a chance. But we need you to help us. We need to prove to them that we can work together." Lyra's eyes widened, and for the first time, she allowed herself to hope. "You're really going to try?" Jack nodded. "We're going to do everything we can, but I need you to stay strong. We can't do this without you." She stepped closer, her voice soft. "I've never been stronger than I am right now. Jack, I believe in this. I believe in us." Jack looked at her, and for a moment, he didn't see the alien he had once feared. He saw someone who had become a part of his world, someone who had changed the course of his life. He wasn't just fighting for Earth anymore. He was fighting for something bigger. He was fighting for the future, for peace, for hope. "Then, we'll fight together," Jack said, his voice steady. Hours later, Jack stood before a massive screen, his eyes glued to the live feed from the military base. The alien ships were approaching, their enormous forms filling the sky. The military was ready. They had their weapons aimed, their defenses in place. But as Jack looked at the ships, he knew what he had to do. He couldn't just wait for the signal to attack. He couldn't sit back and watch as the world went to war. He pressed a button, sending a message to the lead alien ship. He knew it was risky, but he couldn't stand by and let Earth make a mistake. He needed to reach them before it was too late. Attention, Jack's voice rang out over the comms. This is Captain Jack Miller. We are prepared to listen. We want to understand why you're here, what you want, but we cannot let violence take over. We are ready to work with you, but only if you're willing to trust us. There was a long pause. Jack held his breath. Would they respond? Would they agree to peace? Finally, the screen flickered. A face appeared, an alien. Unlike anything Jack had ever seen. But in the alien's eyes, Jack saw something familiar, a spark of hope. The future wasn't certain, but for the first time, it seemed possible. Earth, the alien said, its voice deep but calm. We have come to ask for your help, not to conquer. Together, we can build a future. Together, we can make history. Jack smiled, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. The future was now, and for the first time, it felt like it was within reach.